Hello and welcome back to ReveloGM Games, where this week we're taking another look at things I wish I knew about Pathfinder sooner. The last one of this I kind of did because I felt like I should add my points to people who potentially are looking to change systems, or just are interested in looking at different systems even if they don't want to change necessarily, and it did better than I expected, and I got a lot of comments about people in a similar boat and stuff, and it was cool to see. But I had more things to say that weren't in that video that were more specific, and that's what we're doing today. We're looking at things I wish I knew about the combat, specifically of Pathfinder, sooner. There are going to be a couple of topics that we did already touch on in that video, and if you've not seen that video, please go check it out. I'll have it pinned above. We're going to go into a couple of the topics that I did mention briefly in that 10 things I wish I knew sooner, but in a bit more specific to combat specifically. I've used that word too many times already. These are in no particular order, by the way. Number 1 is shields. In Pathfinder, anyone can use a shield, because in real life, anyone could get a shield and put it on their arm, and you can potentially use that to defend yourself, because, you know, at the very least it's going to defend that arm. However, there are levels to being able to use a shield. You can hold one on your arm and you can use it to defend yourself and increase your AC. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you can use it to its full extent, which is what shield block is. Or at the very least, shield block is a higher extent of using a shield. Some people can also use shields as weapons with shield spikes and shield bosses, which again is another form of training, but we'll leave that for now. If you have a shield, then that's great. You can spend an action on your turn to raise your shield, increasing your AC by whatever that number is. That's what most classes can do, no matter what. That does take one of your 3 actions, so if you're a caster or something, it might be easier for you to cast a shield spell, or just make sure you're not near that close to the fight, and things like that. But if you were a bard, or another class, you know, obviously fighters and people are likely to have shields, and paladins, or champions even. But if you're a bard, maybe, or you were a magus or something, and you want that shield, you still have that option to do it without having to take additional feats for it. However, you can do additional things with the shield. You have the shield block feat, which certain classes like the fighter and the druid get, and some types of cleric, where on your turn, if you take damage and you've got a shield raised, you can use a reaction to reduce that damage equal to the shield's hardness. As your shields get better, they get more hardness, they soak more damage. And essentially you reduce the damage value by the hardness of your shield to 0, and if it's not to 0, you and the shield take that same damage split between you. So a light grazing attack, if there's nothing else going on, you can just be like, well, I'll use my action and just completely ignore that damage. A heavy attack might, you know, sunder your shield, but prevent you from going down, which makes a lot of sense for shields as well. So this makes a lot more sense, I think, in the fact that anyone can strap a shield to their arm and use it to fend off a blow or two every now and again. However, not everyone can get the shield in, you know, the right place to try and, like, lessen a blow to them and stuff, because that does take more training. So it still makes martials and things feel like they have better training with this, but doesn't go as far to be like, oh yeah, well, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a very strong wizard who can use a sword, you still can't use a shield or something like that. At the same time though, if you are a wizard or something and you wanted to learn shield block and things like that, there are also obviously ways to do that. So you still have that option. But yeah, it gives people a lot more versatility with what you can do with shields, I think. Making them more effective in combat by able to affix things to them as well also really helps. And it's good for risk reward decisions too, like I said, because it does take one of your 3 actions to raise a shield. So it's like, are you going to make that extra attack, or are you going to raise your shield, or are you going to maneuver yourself, or are you going to cast that focus spell, or do you want to raise your AC? Because remember, in Pathfinder, raising your AC does mean you're less likely to be hit by critical hit, because crits hit you on a 10 or more over your armor class as well as natural 20. So even boosting your AC by 1 or 2, even if the attack still hits you, potentially saves you from taking a lot more damage. Number 2, turns are faster due to the 3 actions, which we just talked about briefly. And these include movement. If you're doing a spell, that's often going to be 2 or 3 actions, and if it's 2, you still have plenty of other options for your 3rd action. You could raise a shield, you could cast a shield spell, because you can cast multiple spells in a round in Pathfinder. You could move, you could try and hide, you could take cover, you can try and recall knowledge on the thing that you are trying to attack, you could try and feint or try and intimidate it to make you have a better chance of succeeding with a spell as a saving throw, or an AC. Frighten just reduces all DCs and checks. If a martial character can move to flank, or try to trip or disarm or grapple, as well as attacking, they have multiple attack penalties, but we'll come to that in a moment. It's still like just 3 things, and then that's it. You don't have any bonus actions to contend with, you don't have movement and then actions. It's a lot more simplistic. It's you can do this, this and this, or 2 things or 1 thing. You know, there's no super complicated things from different bits and pieces affecting each other. If you want to move twice, great, you can move twice. Then you've only got 1 more action left with what you need to do. It means there's less that you need to focus on your turn overall, and means that the turns go through faster. It also means if you do have a turn where you just do a 3-action spell, you get back round to your turn faster too. When I used to run a lot of 5e, which I still, again, must reiterate, very much enjoy, sometimes people would spend at least like 5 minutes, 10 minutes on a turn because they're trying to figure out exactly how far they can go, or which spells are a bonus action and if they can actually use that or not, and things like that. And obviously, you still get that kind of stuff in Pathfinder occasionally, but it's less so because it's a more streamlined system. And it means that the turns go by faster. You know, someone might have their turn, even at like level 8 and 9 that I'm running at the moment with Abomination Vaults, and within 10 minutes you've circled round at most. Usually less time than that, and sometimes you'd only be halfway through an initiative order when I was running 5e. This one is one of those ones that is no means always going to be the case, but as a general rule, because 2 and 3 action spells do exist, and for fighters, raising a shield, moving and attacking, or performing another maneuver is your 3 actions. Even if you're doing similar things on each turn, but not exactly the same things, it's still pretty quick to figure out in your head. Number 3 is teamwork, and this one is definitely more specific to me, I think. This is not going to be for everyone. But Pathfinder is a more cooperative game, I would say, than 5th edition in regards to the combat anyway. You don't have to play these games just for the combat, of course. Pathfinder's got a lot more rules for things that aren't combat, I'd say, than 5e did, or 2024. It doesn't particularly change much, I don't think that much in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot more rules for non-combat stuff is my point, but for the combat, if you work as a team and you work together, you're going to have a better time, you're going to have more success, and that is more complicated, and that is certainly true, and that's not going to work for everyone, and that's fair enough. But for me, coming from 5e, where most fights, unless they're really carefully planned out, because you have to really carefully plan them out at high levels especially, because they can just become very difficult with balancing, it's usually just, oh well, we can cast our spells, we can run and we can hit the stuff and we'll probably be fine. If you've got a really good GM who's got really good encounter design and stuff and has a lot of time to plan it, then maybe that's not the case for you, and that's great. But for me, when I was running stuff or playing into stuff with my friends where our time was limited, it just usually felt like either we'd get through things pretty easily, or we would be really by the skin of our teeth, even with some degree of preparation. In Pathfinder, you can certainly go and try and fight these things these ways, but it will be tricky, especially with the bosses. Bosses, if they're just one monster, are usually going to have a higher AC in Pathfinder, or they're going to have more hit points, or they're going to have more resistances. They're not going to have all of them, because that would be bad encounter design, and that would be bad monster design. You've got to have weaknesses you can exploit. But that's where things like this come into play within Pathfinder, because if a boss has a low AC, then maybe one of your stronger characters tries to grapple them, or trip them, making them off guard. Their AC gets lower, you're more likely to get a critical hit. Maybe they've got a low will save, so they're easy for you to demoralize, and that makes them frightened, and that means that all their checks and DCs are now lower, and it's easier for you to cast other spells that have saves on them, and to hit them, and everything. Maybe they've got a really powerful weapon, but their saves aren't that high, and you're able to disarm them, and now they've got to spend actions grabbing that, and you can maybe kick it away, and suddenly they're a lot less powerful because they can just punch at you. And you've got casters with spells that reduce an enemy's, AC, or its movement speed, or its saving throws, and you can then exploit that as a martial character, or vice versa, you doing it first and then allowing the spells to get off faster. Whenever you're able to make a creature off guard, which, unlike some people seem to think, is really not that difficult. You can just flank them, you can trip them, you can grapple them, you can be hidden from them. You're then able to reduce their AC, which means you're more likely to hit and more likely to crit, of course, and also means that if you have any rogues, they do get their sneak attack, which does occur on multiple attacks in a round. If they're off guard, it's not just once per round. It's less damage, but you can hit it multiple times. And yeah, things like that. So if you're able to set up things and come up with a plan, it can be really fun when you manage to successfully pull that off. It can be really cool when you're able to pull off those plans and those attacks. Obviously, I think this one's more specific. This is not going to be for everyone. Some people just like to be able to do their own thing, but the feeling of the teamwork when you manage to really get it going and figure out how each person's abilities and spells work and how they can combine to be really effective, it's really cool. Number 4 is the multiple attack penalty, which we mentioned just a moment ago. As I did mention, that makes it more hard to hit multiple times in a round because you can just attack 3 times. The second time you're usually going to be at a -5 penalty, the third time at a -10, if you have agile weapons a -4 and a -8 respectively. There are ways to reduce that penalty, but overall it incentivizes you to do other things with your turn. Maybe you could try moving to come at the boss from a different angle. Maybe you could try shoving them or tripping them or casting that focus spell that you don't use that often. Maybe you could try intimidating it so that it's easier for someone else to try and hit on their next turn, or move so that you're flanking something so someone else who goes later in the round can hit at them. Things like shove and trip do still have multiple attack penalties attached to them, but as of level 2 I'm pretty much sure there are things that you can take which negate or reduce those penalties, which means you can make your attacks and still try and do shoves or trips or grapples to be more likely to be successful with your action than just wasting a third attack with a -10 that is very unlikely to hit. For example, if you demoralize an enemy and make them frightened, that reduces all their checks and DCs. That makes it easier for everyone to hit or successfully cast spells that have saves on them. If you trip an enemy over, that means they've got to spend an action getting up. If you're a fighter, that means you can use a reaction to hit them on the way up, and it means that they've spent an action doing that, so potentially they're more likely to just try and hit you than to spend their next action running over to the squishy wizard who's nearby and hitting them. Stuff like that. Again, it plays into the teamwork thing that we mentioned before, and really helps you to try and think about what else you can do with your turn rather than just running up to something and swinging. Finally, number 5 is delaying your turn. This is a time where you can choose to step out of the initiative order and jump back in after someone else has completed theirs. It permanently changes your initiative. You can't jump back up to where you were, obviously. You're in this new place. This was in earlier editions of D&D, but is not in 5th edition for some understandable reasons to do with how the game works, how the turns work, and you can read about that elsewhere, but safe to say it makes sense why it's not in that system, but I quite like it being here. Again, because of the teamwork elements that we've mentioned above, sometimes it really is very useful with you going before other people. Maybe you need that other fighter to be in position for you to get that off-guard bonus that you really need to exploit them. Maybe you really need a spell to go off before you're even going to be able to deal damage to a certain enemy because of the type of damage that they need to deal, and they need to cast a spell on your weapon and you weren't able to get that prepared beforehand. Because of the synergies and the teamwork, being able to shift where you move in the initiative order on occasion can be very useful. And that's about it. There's definitely more things I could talk about and go into more detail, but I don't feel like we need to do all of that just for these. And that's going to do it for this video. I initially had another segment planned where I was going to do a brief combat, show the difference between utilising these 5 things I mentioned and not. But unfortunately time has not been around as of late for me. I'm in the process of moving and work has been very busy, so unfortunately whilst I started that is not finished, and I'm trying to adhere to the schedule that I created and to keep that consistent. So I might come back and do that in a week or 2, maybe, perhaps, we will see. But for now, that is the video. So yeah, sorry that's a bit of an abrupt ending. It was supposed to go on a little bit longer. My apologies for that. Hopefully within the next couple of months things will be sorted with the move and everything, and it'll be more consistent. But until then, yeah, sorry about that. It's a bit of a mess. But I hope you've still enjoyed the video so far. If you have a different 5 things relating to Pathfinder combat that you find really interesting, or any things that I've missed or got slightly wrong, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. It helps out with algorithms and all that. And I do more Pathfinder content. I try and do 1 video a week, and I've been pretty consistent with that. Mostly Pathfinder, but occasionally other TTRPG stuff as well. But that's all. If you made it this far, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.